This episode may contain explicit language.
It's hard to avoid what's been going on in Minneapolis.
We're bringing on Slate writer Shirin Ali to share some tips on how to help and keep your family safe.
A lot of immigrant families, the parents were being taken away by federal agents and their children were left parentless. And so this form, the delegation of parental authority, was a way to give another adult consent of their child.
We have to be each other's safety nets because we can't count on any institutional safety net.
This is Karen Feeding. We're three friends with kids who get together every week to talk life, swap advice, and keep each other sane while we muddle through this weird and wonderful thing called parenting. I'm Zak Rosen. I host another podcast called Weirdly Helpful, and I am dad to Noah, who's 8, and Ami, who's 5. We are freezing in Detroit.
I'm Elizabeth Newcamp. I write the homeschool and family travel blog, Dutch Goose, and I'm the mom to Henry, who's 13, Oliver, who's 11, and Teddy, who's 9. We live in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Hey, I'm Lucy Lopez. I host another podcast, The Mamacita Rica. I'm mother to Amelia, who's 15, and Avery, who's 13, and we live in Miami.
Every week, we answer your questions, share our own parenting triumphs and fails, and try to make this feel like the kind of conversation you'd have with your friends.
But today we're doing things a little differently. It's hard to avoid what's been going on in Minneapolis. And believe me, our group chat is lit, blowing up this weekend. It's stressful. It's scary AF, as the kids would say. And honestly, we're not doing the best right now. And it feels like what is happening in Minneapolis could happen anywhere. And there is stuff like this happening in a lot of places.
So we wanted to get practical for the families watching. We're bringing on Slate writer Shirin Ali to share some tips on how to help and keep your family safe if ICE comes to your city. Shirin, welcome to Karen Feeding. You've been busy, huh?
Yeah, the last couple of days have been a whirlwind, to say the least.
So you've been writing about what's been happening in Minneapolis. We're talking to you. It's Tuesday now. Our listeners are hearing this on Thursday. What have you been following today?
So right now, I'm actually following the Trump administration's response to Alex Pretti's death and how it seems to kind of contradict the GOP's historical line when it comes to gun rights. And how a lot of the conservative movement is kind of calling them out for their contradictory line when it comes to, kind of victimizing Alex Pretti for having a gun at the scene. So yeah, that's a thread I'm following right now.
And on the 23rd, you put out a piece where you interviewed Minnesota State Senator Erin May Quaid about basically like what's going to happen if and when ICE comes to our town. So can you share a little bit about what you learned from that conversation and just from your reporting in general?
Yeah. So yeah, that was a really kind of scary but fascinating conversation. The senator has been experiencing federal agents in her city since the beginning of the month, the beginning of January. And what caught my attention was that she had put out a TikTok video where she's talking about what she's been experiencing on the ground in Minnesota, and kind of really focusing on how, Minnesota isn't an exception. This is something that Americans across the country should be prepared for. And so it was a really no frills characterization of what she's experiencing in her day-to-day life. And she wanted to warn others about what the reality is and what they may experience when and if federal agents come to their town. And so I called her up and I spoke to her about kind of what drove her to make that TikTok, as well as what advice she would give others, so that when and if they're faced with federal agents in their neighborhood, they kind of know what to do, and kind of, I think, regain a little bit of their power to protect themselves. So she highlighted things that, I think a lot of us would maybe naturally think about when it comes to, if you get pepper sprayed at a protest, make sure that you rinse your eyes out with like saline or water, carry a whistle. But there were also other things that she pointed out that, I had not thought of. And so one thing in particular that she talked about was this parental consent form. And that was a form that's basically, it stands for the Delegation of Parental Authority. And it's something that she in her community had been using quite a lot because a lot of immigrant families, the parents were being taken away by federal agents, and their children were left parentless. And so this form was a way to give another adult consent of their child to take care of their care, their medical needs, etc., without taking away any of that authority from that child's actual like guardian or parent. And so that was something that was really interesting to me that I didn't know was even a thing, but I think really something important, particularly for families.
Sorry, is that something that parents can just download and fill out? Do you know if you need an attorney to have that done? Like, because that seems like something anyone who is worried could do today.
Yeah. So from my understanding, I believe that this form, the requirements for it may vary state to state. But from my understanding, it is something that you don't, I think in some cases you may need it to be notarized. But it is readily available in that, like, you can like Google it online, and like your state website should have it. I believe I did a quick search, and I was able to find it within like the first page of Google results in New York. That's where I'm based. And so it is pretty readily available, but I think the requirements on how you submit it may vary depending on where you live.
And I'm sure that's something that organizations working with these populations can help with as well. So like if you need a notary, don't let that be a barrier to entry.
Yes.
I'm like, call your local immigration aid. So, like, they have one. A legal office has a notary. So just if you're listening and this sounds like, oh gosh, I should do this today, it's doable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was something that the senator like emphasized, is that like these are things that you can do to prepare. So even if, you don't actively have federal agents in your neighborhood or in your community, this is still something that you can proactively do and just have ready in the worst case scenario where you do have, immigration enforcement happening.
Did she talk at all about being an observer or like a recorder and how we can participate, in that? Like, one of the things I'm in Hawaii, and there was a public radio piece that highlighted sort of websites and things that are keeping track of that. And one of the things that I notice is like, I'm out and about a lot as a mom. And so it's super easy for me here. There's like a website that if you spot, ICE vehicles, whatever, you can like easily send it in and report it. They confirm it and put it out. And so that's like super easy for me to do. And I'm out and about and I see that. Should people be looking for this in communities? Like, how can we participate in that effort?
Yeah. So I think that, again, this is probably going to be something that varies depending on where you live and kind of how tuned in you are with your community. But the senator talked about how in Minnesota, they've basically set up these like online groups via Signal that they've organized by region, essentially, and people who are interested in kind of like participating in kind of helping protect their community and support their community when federal agents show up. They are coordinating on these signal chats. And so there are specific people who are in charge of going out into the community and looking for federal agents. And when they spot them, they'll report it back to the group. And they'll include, any identifiers like maybe the federal agent's plates, or, what the federal agent might have been wearing. And so that was something that was stirred up by members of the community. And so I don't know if, there's something that is happening, like more like one program that is kind of going through the entire country per se. But I think that like people, families, it's worth talking to your neighbors and members of your community and like establishing a network like that, which is essentially what how I understood the senator and how they were handling it in Minneapolis. These were stood up just by members of the community, and everyone was able to participate based on what they felt comfortable doing.
Let's be honest, life gets messy, families fight, coworkers overstep, partners do weird stuff in bed. Luckily, Slate's advice columnists have seen it all. Sign up for the free Slate Advice newsletter and get our latest takes on sex, parenting, money, and every moral gray area in between, plus exclusive bonus letters delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at slate.com/advice.
I have a question because my 15-year-old asked me this yesterday, and I really didn't know how to answer it properly. And it was, is it true that in Minneapolis they were just like knocking on doors, pulling people out? And that was part of her question. And then the other part of her question was, will they do that here in Miami? And I have, my opinion, my personal opinion on that, but I would like to hear what you have to think.
Yeah, so I'll preface this by saying I don't have children. I do have a bunch of very young nieces and nephews, and I think that it's a really, really difficult reality that we're living in right now. I will say that in Minneapolis, the senator did tell me that there were agents, federal agents in her community that were going door to door, and they were basically looking for anybody that was Black or brown or Asian, and that was their reason to suddenly detain and arrest someone. And so it's a really scary truth to confront. But from my reporting, from what this state senator told me, that is the case in Minnesota and in and around Minneapolis. And one thing that she really emphasized is just how ubiquitous these agents are. And it was shocking even for me to hear, in that, agents just knocking on people's door, and they don't necessarily have a list. They're just hoping whoever opens the door is Black or brown. And, schools and businesses being targeted, agents waiting in parking lots, and parents keeping their children home from school because they're scared of themselves being taken away or their children. So it is a really, really terrifying situation for families. And I think that every parent has a sense of how much their kids can understand in this moment, and are maybe willing to willing and able to kind of handle when it comes to like the reality of it. But yeah, that's unfortunately a really difficult question that I'm sure parents all over the country are really grappling with right now.
We had a conversation with our daughters yesterday about we're Hispanic but my daughters are white passing Hispanic females, right? And I saw that in videos that I've seen circulating online, these agents are specifically asking people like, what hospital were you born in? Which I found just insane to ask somebody that. And now my husband and I have actively decided like these are things that we need our daughters to know. Because I even asked our youngest, do you know what hospital you were born in? And she was like, "Oh, the building next to this park." I'm like, no, you need to know the name of the hospital. And before, I remember when our kids were in elementary school, it was like a big deal to learn your address, to learn your phone numbers, things like that, just in case you got lost. And now I feel like, is this something that as guardians and as parents, we need to get used to? Like questions like that? Like, do we need to start prepping our children to be able to answer questions? Were they born in this country? You know, what hospital were you born in? And if you travel outside of your state, should I be bringing my passport? Like, these are all questions that my 15-year-old and 13-year-old have been asking me. And again, we live in Miami, which I consider a bubble. And I'm like, is the bubble about to burst? So, yeah, is that something that the senator talked about? The questions that they're being asked when they knock on these doors?
That's a really important part of this conversation. And that is not something exactly that the senator hit on. However, I think that the overall, like, kind of given the tips and suggestions she was making about like these parental consent, DOPA forms, I think that the answer to your question, in my opinion, is yes. I think that if there's one thing that I've been covering the Trump administration and immigration since the start of this year of 2025, and if there's one thing that is certain, it is that this administration is really unpredictable, and their agenda, it it escalates and de-escalates in a way that defies logic, and also defies consistency. And I think that the bottom line is that I think all families want to be prepared. You never hope that you're in a worst case scenario, but when and if you are, you want to feel like you can handle it and that you have a plan in place, so that you can secure your safety and your well-being. And I think that if that means that, you have to tell and remind your children what hospital they were born in, I think that that is, unfortunately, kind of the price we have to pay right now. We saw that the CBP commander, Gregory Bovino, was reassigned to leave Minneapolis, which I think people are viewing as a positive. Will that have an impact on like the day-to-day immigration enforcement we're seeing across the country? That remains to be seen. We don't know. And I think that it's best to stay prepared.
Lucy, can I make some practical suggestions to that, which is that everyone should have access to their passport and copies of any papers that you have. And I suggest that you have electronic copies. And I also suggest that family members have electronic copies, and that more than two or more people know where you keep those in your home. I think there's a real argument as to whether you want to produce the actual documents to someone that could take them from you. So making sure that you do have copies of that. And we have been in situations in other countries where all of a sudden we needed documentation, and having like my parents have copies and us having copies online, like in the cloud or whatever, have helped us get through those situations. So not to say the same thing will happen here, because those were very random things. But I think that in like this time, everybody checking and making sure, like everybody, making sure that you know where those copies are and someone else knows. Because let's say that you are, you know, detained for whatever reason, whether you have those on you or not, are those people going to listen to that? Is the person coming to help you that has the time to get legal help, that has that, can they get a copy of your documents, right? That is going to be the quickest way to get you help. So I think, again, that speaks to like the community that you're building around you, which is why you have people screaming their names, screaming their information, you know, like we have to be each other's safety nets because we can't count on any institutional safety net.
A lot of my friends in Miami are actively on neighborhood WhatsApp chats where if they see, like last week, they saw like 2 dark vans pull up into the neighborhood and everybody was like, oh, they're here. They just like circled the neighborhood and then left, but everybody knew who was there. And they just knew it. They're just like, those aren't cops. They're just not cops.
I just wanted to throw in, I went to a training the other night, a free training through No Kings. If you go to nokings.org, you can sign up for their future sessions. This was just a live YouTube where it was called Eyes on Ice, and it was all about like what our First Amendment rights are and are not. It's about documenting and recording and how to do it safely. Like if you have a whistle, you know, what will courts recognize as protected by the First Amendment and what might not be, because it's a kind of, you know, there haven't been, from what I understand, many or any cases where this whistling has kind of come up. So go to nokings.org for that, and you can also, you know, sign up for alerts and actions from them, which is like a consortium of organizations like the ACLU from you know, working all across the country.
Zach, was that like, what is the time commitment there? 1 hour online?
It's 1 hour, but it's also now streaming. Like if you can't do it live,
so you can just go and watch their training.
You can
do right now.
You can do it right now. Nokings.org. Yeah.
Any word on what teachers and school counselors and just people who are in these, you know, like in the little world of these kids in Minneapolis, like what's that language looking like between teacher and student? Do you have any insight on that? We've got a lot of teachers who listen to our show who would love to know maybe what the other side is doing.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, I didn't get much insight into that. Yeah. The most that, you know, the senator just touched on, which is kind of repeating a little bit of what I've already said, but, you know, a lot of kids are just not showing up to school right now, in Minnesota. And parents are, you know, the communities are trying to, you know, they're creating patrols at bus stops to like protect kids as they, you know, go get on the bus to and from school. But in terms of what teachers are talking about and how they're talking about this, unfortunately, I don't have much on that.
Zach, would the training you spoke about be good for them as well? Like if we have teachers listening, wondering.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And Shirin, we really want to thank you for the work you've been doing. Listeners, check out what Shirin has been writing over at slate.com. And before we go, we have one more perspective from on the ground in Minneapolis we want to share with all of you. It's from my friend Autumn Brown. She is the co-host of another podcast that I make called How to Survive at the End of the World. And she sent us this dispatch from Minneapolis.
Hi, Lucy, Elizabeth, and Zach. This is Autumn Brown speaking to you from my home in occupied Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is Dakota and Anishinaabe land. I live here as a mother, organizer, and artist. I have 3 teenage children. It's day 57 of the federal invasion of our city, which means that we've been under occupation for 8 weeks and 1 day. after another state execution in the streets with the death of Alex Pretti, who was shot and killed just a few blocks north of my home. It's become clear to me that people's eyes are on Minnesota right now. And so I've been thinking about what to tell you all about what I'm seeing here and also what it's like to parent under occupation. I thought I would share just a few vignettes. Parenting under occupation looks like sending your oldest child out the door in the morning and counting the minutes between when he leaves the house and when he should arrive at his bus stop before checking his location to be sure he got onto the bus, knowing he's a child but that he looks like a man and he's walking through a high ICE enforcement zone, aka your neighborhood. Parenting under occupation looks like a daughter pleading with you through tears to not put your life at risk and saying to you, Mom, I know you're an activist, but I cannot tolerate the stress of knowing that you're out there. Please do not put yourself in harm's way. Parenting under occupation looks like telling everyone everywhere you go to be safe, whether or not you know them, telling your children to be safe every time you part from them and knowing that it just means something different. Parenting under occupation looks like having your head on the swivel constantly. It looks like our blended family sitting down and developing an emergency exit plan so that we know exactly how we would leave the city and stay together. Parenting under occupation also looks like really getting to see the web of community and remembering how to actually be with one another. I feel like the scaredest I've ever been as a parent and also the most connected and cared for and protected that I've ever felt as a parent at the same time, which is hard. It doesn't exactly make sense. It's hard to describe, but every day I drive my daughters to school. And as I'm driving to school, I pass the elementary school that's nearest to my house. And every day the same volunteers are outside at the exact same time with their whistles and their reflective vests on. And we wave to each other. It's always the same people and they are there protecting the elementary school. And when I get to my kids' schools, there are parent patrols at my kids' schools out there with their whistles and their reflective vests on. And they are just out there making sure that our kids can get to and from the school building safely. And every conversation that I'm having with fellow parents is about how do we make sure everyone, all of the kids and the families in our kids' schools are getting their material needs met? How do we make sure that folks who need to get to school can get to school safely? How do we make sure that people are getting supplies who need supplies? How do we make sure that the families who need rental assistance are getting rental assistance? All the conversations are about figuring out how we meet the material needs of community and leverage the abundance of resources that exist if we all pool them together. In a very real way, what we're seeing is in real time, a community building the skills that are needed in order to transition into the kind of society that we actually want to live in. And I wouldn't wish this crisis on anyone, but I would wish these skills on everyone. I would wish these skills on everyone. So for those of you who are in cities and towns that ICE might be on their way to, my advice is to go ahead and sit down with your children, have age-appropriate conversations with them about what this looks like. Make sure that they have whistles. My kids all have whistles. Make sure that they know their rights. And then start having conversations with the people that live closest to you. We organize block by block here. And wherever you live, that might look a little different. But organize the people that you live closest to figure out how you can protect one another and how you can identify who in your community is most vulnerable to targeted ICE enforcement. Yeah, don't be afraid to start the conversation. Be the one to start the conversation. Start it rooted in care and protection, and you really can't go wrong. And for those of you who are wondering about how are our kids gonna be able to handle this, I'll just say they can handle it. Kids are very resilient and they're also very awake to what's going on. They are growing up in a fundamentally different reality than the reality that all of us who are parenting them grew up in. I don't think they're as confused about the situation as many of us are. And they're not as slow to adapt to the conditions as many of us have been. That's what I got for now. Thanks for listening. Thank you all for the love and prayers and support that you've been pouring onto the city. Thank you for keeping your eyes on us. Tell our story to everyone who will listen.
If you have something to share or if you want to send us a question, you can email us at careandfeedingpod@slate.com. You can leave us a voicemail too at 646-357-9318 or join the conversation in the Slate Parenting Facebook group.
And that's our show. Please subscribe, leave us a review, tell your friends. If you want more parenting advice, you can find Care and Feeding the column on slate.com. This episode of Care and Feeding's video production is handled by Micah Phillips. Mia Lobel is Executive Director of Podcasts for Slate, and Ben Richmond is Senior Director of Podcast Operation.
I'm Lucy Lopez. You can find me on IG at the Lucy Lopez.
I'm Elizabeth Newcamp. You can find me on Instagram at elizabeth.newcamp.
And you can find me there at Muzachary. That's Muzachary. Thanks for listening. If you want more no-nonsense advice about parenting, relationships, money, and everything else life throws your way, sign up for the Slate Advice newsletter. A special thanks to our Slate Plus members. If you haven't already, consider joining. Slate Plus members get unlimited access to all of Slate's journalism and help support our independent reporting.